Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Difr podcast. We have someone special from the US, Chris, and he has his own podcast. He's a chef. He travels a lot, and in September 12th, he's about to go into the wilderness and travel a little bit more. And because I'm really used to this kind of lifestyle. Well, I follow a lot of blogs where people travel, they hunt, and I really admire those people because they like to go out in the nature and they like to live very close to the nature. That brings you really close to our ancestors. So that's a perspective I really like. That's why we have Chris today here from the Wild Man Chef podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself? Because I always butcher introduction.
No worries. Hey, everybody. My name is Christian. I have a podcast called The Wild Man Chef, and basically, it's about nutrition specifically for men. But the idea of it is kind of reconnecting with the primal part of ourselves, like John said, and getting back to those basic roots so that we're not doing this thing of 5 weeks to six pack or anything like that. We're actually creating a sustainable lifestyle that isn't like this chicken breast, brown rice, miserable thing. We're making real dishes that taste really good. You can make for your date or your wife, girlfriend, and they won't set you back when it comes to your overall fitness and health goals.
hmm and to tell you, I've been really getting into fitness in the past 6 or 7 weeks. I'll tell you the journey if you are you
Oh yeah,
interested in that.
yeah,
So
of course.
when I started this podcast, I started seeing myself out there, and I used to watch Joe Rogan's podcast, and I say I used to because when you start watching this one single podcast too much, and then you're podcasting yourself, you start getting these influences. You
Yeah.
start like mimicking that. So I stopped watching that whenever like I got time. So I started focusing on my own thing, and then I realized that I am not a person that is qualified enough to give anybody advice on growth if I'm not growing myself. So I started going to the gym every day, and then there's a couple of other factors. So I saw this. There was this Facebook group called it was like Sapto Nepali dating or something like that, and then I see all these pictures of all these people being posted, and then they look all fit, and then all these females are writing nice things about them, and I thought maybe if I put my face out there and if I put my body, how many people will be able to respond really positively about that? And I thought really hard. I was really honest about it, and I didn't think a lot of people would. And then that kind of changed the whole perspective. I said I should stop talking and start going to the gym. And I have only missed a couple of days. From I started doing in further from like through the Nepali calendar, so it's been almost 4 months. So I was missed only a couple of days. That's the only days when I was not in the valley itself or not in the city. And even in those days, I started going hiking and everything. Now I want to ask you, if somebody was to follow this journey and do self discovery and then go out in the wilderness or try a new thing, what would be the first step they need to take? Like I said, with me, it was self realization. What made you go into this discovery?
Well, I think the most important part is self awareness
Mm-hmm.
and really kind of cataloging where you are because like you said, you went on that dating site and you saw all these guys that were in really great shape and all these women really excited about it, and you didn't really see that reflected in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you are, but you can't expect yourself to be that guy tomorrow. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a long time, it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of really hard work. So I think the first step really is understanding what you're not, and from there getting understanding what you are, and then you can with that information move in a way that isn't self-hating or like beating yourself with a whip. Like almost I started looking at myself almost like as another person.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was to try to train somebody else or try to bring somebody else up, I wouldn't be telling them that you're a piece of crap because you didn't make it today, or you're not good enough and you're never going to get there, and you're just I can't believe you're like this. I wouldn't tell them that. I would be like, all right, fine, this is where you are, this is how you can be better, and it's just small steps. So I think that's one really good first important point when it comes to doing something new out of your comfort zone, like kind of going towards your daily workouts thing. you can't really get too down about yourself if you, because you just started this, being consistent about it.
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of times, especially in my own family, because both my parents are both I grew up and they were obese,
Mhm.
and what they would do is they would have this like grand thing that they were just like, I'm gonna do this, and then they would get really crazy about it, and then it would die off. And
Mhm.
so instead of going that direction, I think it's fantastic that you're working to do it every day, but take a step back and be like, I didn't used to do this at all, and this month I did it this many times. Next month maybe I can do it more. And even if like you get 3 months in and you miss an entire week, maybe even 2 weeks, you'd be like, okay, well last year I didn't go to the gym nearly as much as I did this year. And so
Mhm.
by widening the picture, and I'm sure I know Gary Vee has gone to Nepal, I believe, and I listen to his stuff a lot,
Mhm.
and mostly because it's what you take in is what you spit out, and so I like taking in good positive things. But having that bigger scope, not rushing it so much, and actually slowly trying to get from one stone to the next, that's what's going to really create that sustainability. And I
Mhm.
saw this in my career too. I went straight from culinary school
Mhm.
to going to Vegas, which was a crazy idea in the first place.
Mhm.
And being a 21-year-old getting to Vegas,
Mhm.
that was just to live there was crazy. I didn't realize it at the time.
Mhm.
But I went straight from I worked at a strip at like a pizza joint for like a month, and then I applied to this big grand opening of this Food Network chef that I used to grow up watching on TV. And I just went really intense about it. I got the job and I worked really hard for 2 years. And so I went from basically being told I wasn't even worth the person's breath that was working with me to being a head line cook on the grill and
Mhm.
almost getting a chef spot, but I didn't get it because I burned out. And the reason for that burnout was is because I expected way too much of myself,
Mhm.
being saying that I have to get here to either feel good about how I look in society,
Mhm.
to attract a woman that I want,
Mhm.
or to feel good about what my parents think. And that having those insane standards for myself was actually less practical and more detrimental to that long-term sustainable growth. And I
Mhm.
really had to fall pretty hard to realize that and slowly learn how to build myself back up.
Mhm.
Honestly, I mean, this is pretty intense, and I don't really care to go too deep into this, but I started with this because I was so depressed after Las Vegas that I was suicidal.
Mhm.
And I started the Wild Man Chef because during the process of healing, I met a girl.
Mhm.
She kind of broke my heart, and it really messed me up really bad.
Mhm.
And because I wasn't in a really very healthy state of mind to begin with. And so through that pain, I created this to try and it was A, therapy for me, and B, like I needed to feel like I was doing something for
Mhm.
others in order to feel like I was contributing and I wasn't just sitting around wallowing. And
Mhm.
also, see, it kind of gave me a reason and almost an accountability to my audience to keep improving, similar to what you have found with your podcast and being like, hey, how can I even say anything to anybody else if I'm not really keeping it up myself?
Mhm. Yeah, that seems to like initially when it was something about going and impressing people or in some way trying to show myself as a better person, and then it was outward. But then now, if I look at it, like I used to do like these short stints, like go to the gym for 2 months or 3 months back when I was in New Orleans. Like go to the gym. It was free. If you're in college, you get this free gym membership. It doesn't cost much, so I just followed along with my friends. But then when you are in college and especially in engineering school, like you don't get that you don't get that comfortable schedule so that you can like always drop everything and then just go to the gym, or maybe that was an excuse I was giving myself. Now, like you said, I have my own journey. I spent a year like trying to look for jobs in the space sector and never got anywhere. Let me tell you, I applied for about 2,000 jobs and did not land one job. So I came back
Hmm.
home to Nepal, and then what I realized was I wanted to start my own thing here, and this podcast was something I started with my friend. And then even his story and my story, I don't want to get into too much deep, because like, this podcast is about growth, and all of that was added, like adding up to what I wanted to do in my life. And then I realized there are certain things that I want to learn first, and then move on into creating value. That's how this podcast was born. And my thinking about this podcast is I always want to invite people from all corners of the world. Right now I'm from Nepal, and then it's morning here, and you're over there in the US, and it's nighttime over there. Last time we did saw a podcast with someone from Serbia. They were blockchain developers. And then yesterday we did this podcast with someone from Nepal who's been to London, and then she came back to start her own tooling gallery. Now, why I mention all these people is because podcasts have become this platform where you get to meet all these random strangers and then share your life story. What has been like the most rewarding thing about your podcast that you've earned yourself by having these communications or having these talks?
Well, I did start the podcast with the interview kind of style, and I just had it's a lot of work to get people on the podcast, and I wanted to do it more. So that was just like the first 4 episodes, and those were great. I was able to learn. I was able to talk to this private chef in Washington D.C., and it's kind of nice seeing people that just go for it. And me, like, I have some accolades, I have professional training, and I still get like a little bit nervous going for it. And so seeing this guy seeing some of these people that just have none of the formal training or experience that I do going for it, I'm just like, shoot, well, I should go for it too. And so that's really nice. But after that, I just went to a solo podcast where I just try to give as much as I can. And, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm in school to be a nutritionist. And I think that's maybe what it did, because it started as sort of like me just talking through how I was just trying to get through each day and use the fitness stuff to just deal with the demons. And that's when I was doing 10-mile runs, and I ran a marathon, and I was just going nuts and going crazy at the combat gym. But what the podcast really did for me, just speaking solo, is it gave me an accountability partner, almost in the form of an audience, and it really showed me what direction I want to go in. Because for a long time, I mean, I'm just about to turn 27, and I was having dinner with my mom, and she was like, maybe you should date like 30-year-old women. And I'm like, oh, that's a little old. And she's like, you're almost 30. And that hit me pretty hard. And after she said that, I decided to think about things a lot. But I started to understand, first of all, I'm not 30 yet. 30 is when you get real about the career. I'm still like got my I'm still kind of mid 20s, late mid 20s. And so I still got some crazy 20-year-old guy stuff to do. But overall, the podcast, what it really did for me is it gave me this platform of discovery. And it was less about, I fall into the same trap of validation, trying to get numbers, stuff like that. But it has become more about just me discovering what I like to do, what I really care about the most, and what direction I want to move forward in the future. And that has really given me a reason to go back to school and get my formal degree in nutrition, because it's not this bullcrap philosophy degree that I'm just getting to have a degree. It's a legitimate STEM field that I am going there not to just have this safety net, but I'm really going there for the information. And that's something that I couldn't really have that. I didn't have the why before when I was going to school. And so by having that why, that's what it really did for me. It gave me the why. And when you have the why, man, nothing stops you when you have the why.
Yeah, something interesting that just popped into my head when you said you're 27 and you have all these wild things to do at 27, like all the people in their 20s do. And I can understand that. That's completely natural to me. For me, getting married, whenever people say like, when do you want to get married? It's like 35. That's I think that's when I would like start getting settled. And people just look at me in Nepal because of the cultural difference. They're just looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'll tell you a little bit of Nepal if
Yeah, I'd like to know because I don't know anything about y'all's
oh,
culture.
okay, that's perfect. Now we're going into the interesting part of this podcast, and not that I'm saying this part
I
wasn't.
know what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
just chalk
because
it up
like
to your English being a second language. Why
yeah,
not?
even if you spend a lot of time like going into university in US, trust me, speaking English when you're surrounded by Nepalese folks and then all these other people from all over the world, speaking English just becomes like, oh yeah, I didn't speak English at all today. Like even like,
That's
like I was
crazy, dude.
surrounded by Nepali people.
That sounds
Uh,
awesome, though.
yeah, it was such a great experience. We'll definitely
You're
talk about.
making us look bad because we're like struggling to learn Spanish, which is basically the same language, and you're like speaking all these different languages. You're like making us look bad, man.
Yeah, no, but it's the culture difference. We we don't have a lot of people like in Nepal that can show a little bit of impact all over the world. America has a lot of impact. Like
Mhm.
UK speaks the same language. Canada, Canadians speak French as well, and then you
Yeah,
have Australians. So a lot of people over the world speak English. So it becomes sort of a
that makes
universal
sense.
language.
Yeah.
And then so yeah, in Nepal, usually ladies get married between the ages of 18 to 22 or
Oh
24.
wow.
If they
Okay.
don't get married at like 25, now these days it's a little bit different, but if they don't get married at 27, people start talking. Like society in itself is structured differently. For a guy,
Interesting.
it's very natural to get married at your age. Like I know people who have like children who are 5 or 6 at your age, like 27.
Yeah.
That's this, and then they're telling me, and I go to this gym, and then they see this beard, and they think I'm in my early 30s too, and then they're always telling me like, are you? I thought you were married or something. I was like,
Mm.
no, I'm not married. So yeah, Nepal is this country is that sandwich between India and China. So you have China here and you have India here. So Nepal's
Mhm.
sort of sandwich in between. We've got Mount Everest, if you've heard about Mount Everest,
Yeah. Yeah.
tallest
Of course.
mountain in the
Yeah.
world. And we also have other ranges of mountains. We have Mount Annapurna, that's also above 8,000 meters. We have a lot of good food. You love those. Have you ever
Mhm.
had a dumpling?
When you say dumpling, you
Yeah.
have to kind of describe it to me because
So,
there's.
you know what a pierogi is?
No, I don't know what a pierogi is. Is it a dumpling
So,
like what I
ravioli.
would find at a Chinese restaurant?
You know what a ravioli is,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
imagine a ravioli, right? But instead of like you're doing it from the side. So what you do is you get a little bit of the pasta dough and then you make it really thin and you put some like stuffing like a meat, chicken meat or a buffalo meat or beef or whatever you want to put it and then you wrap it around and you steam it. So that's what a momo is.
Okay. Okay.
So
Gotcha.
that's what a momo is. So it's sort of the national dish of Nepal
Is it rice?
unofficially.
The
It's called the
pasta?
Momo. Momo. I'm gonna text you that right now. It's called
Okay.
it's got a hyphen in its name. Um
Yeah, I'll try making it because I've been learning how to. I just taught myself how to make curry, and I'm really
Whoa.
into learning all these different things.
Yeah, I cook a lot too. That's why I was actually interested. I used to cook a lot when I was in college, and then I used to cook like chicken and Nepali dishes. I used to cook jambalaya and then feed it
Oh,
to all of
that's
my.
awesome.
Yeah, and I learned all of that skill over there in New Orleans. I did not cook at all when I was here in high school, and then when I went to college, like you're cut off from your family. They're like thousands of miles away, and you got to survive. And that's when you start learning how to cook. And my first time I cooked, I put too much salt in it. That's a different story. I don't want to get into. So you got momos, and then you got a Nepalese donut. It's called a cell,
Hmm.
like a cell battery or cell, and it's pretty
Okay.
good. And then we got the traditional rice curry, chicken, goat meat, and all of that stuff. And there's a bunch of other stuff. There's salads with yogurt. It's a savory salad. It's called chugoni. That's very close to me because that's a dish that's from my part of Nepal. So
Hmm.
Nepal's got different states, and um, it's from my part of Nepal. So yeah, there's a lot of food diversity. If you ever come to Nepal, and I hope you do, there's a lot of
Oh yeah.
wilderness. There's a lot of wilderness over here. There's a lot of mountains. There's a lot of rhinos, tigers, elephants. We got elephants here, we got tigers, we got rhinos. There's a lot of geographical diversity. There's a lot of animals. I think we have about 14 different wildlife reservations here in a small fun.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
you'll love it here. If you ever come to
Yeah.
Nepal, you should go and trek. We got the famous Annapurna trek circuit. So that takes about like a month to complete, and then you get to see all these mountains. And I don't know if you dabble in cannabis, but yeah, Nepal's been famous for cannabis since the 70s.
So that's kind of why I
Oh.
was a little bit late.
So that's very interesting because the episode right before this, I had Joshua Marpet from Red Lion LLC. He has this consultancy for IT services and compliance services over there in Delaware. And then he's the one, he showed me his gun from the 1700s, the British people used to invade India. And then he showed that gun in that podcast. And then in this episode, you're showing me the good herbs here. Everybody, all the stoners in Nepal would be so happy to see it. Okay, okay. I do want to ask because in Nepal, researching cannabis is legalized. I talked to the
Oh,
official body researching cannabis for research purposes, educational purposes is legalized. But then you are not allowed to smoke. But then here's the funny part. If you are a foreigner, basically a guy with white skin, or if you're an African American, if you come to Nepal, the police never catches you if they catch you smoking. That's the that's a funny part. So you
they
could
don't
get
catch
free
you,
organ.
or they don't like bust
They
you.
don't care. I've seen
Oh,
this gentleman, this guy I met from France. He was walking and rolling this right in front of the police station, smoking it, and the police didn't do anything to him. And then I asked the police, and then he said, "Oh, that's the reason the foreigners come to Nepal to smoke the organic herb." And I was like, "Damn, double standard."
that's
But
messed up, man.
that's messed up, yeah, man. I could go to jail even mentioning the fact that yeah, I support this moment, but it is what it is. But can you explain a little bit? Have you ever cooked with cannabis or canna butter? Or have you dabbled with that?
Oh, hell yeah, for
Oh,
sure. I'm from Oregon, and basically, if you want to become a professional stoner, you go to Oregon.
I understand.
And what's kind of funny is that my most conservative Christian family lives in Oregon, so they're like a little bit black sheep there. But um, yeah, I did dabble with the cannabis butter. The thing is, with the consumable cannabis stuff, it's a different drug. It's more of a hallucinogen. So people will get a different kind of effect from it. And I'm sure listening to Joe Rogan, you know all about it.
Yeah,
Um, and I've
LP
definitely,
and DMT.
yeah.
LP and DMT.
Right, dude.
Yeah.
That dude is my hero. I want to be just like him. Basically, yeah. It's a different it's a different drug, but it is really great. But you have to be a little scientific about it. I did some different testing, mostly for taste, because you have to go with like chocolate stuff in order to even make it like doable. Like I remember in college, in culinary school, most of the college left for summer, and we would still. It was like a compressed program, and I would have a crock pot with weed, and it would just stink up the whole house. So I would just like have coffee burning the whole day, just so it wouldn't stink up the house so much. But through the processes of learning and everything, I actually learned the best way to do it. Really,
Mm-hmm.
is to basically you want to boil the weed and get the THC out, and then you
So wait a minute. So you get like a pot of water, you put the weed in it, you boil the weed, you get the
yeah.
weed out, and then do you get the weed out in the water, the remnants of it, or how do you?
So what I used to do is I would blanch the weed, which is you just boil it for a little bit and then you kind of cool it off, you dry it out in the oven, and then use that you use that in the butter, and then you use a French press to get the butter out. But I was finding that it ended up being very weak, and I would use the leftover water and I would put some kind of like sugar or honey or whatever and
Mm-hmm.
make this like really nice tea. And my mom and stepdad, they drank it and got really fucked up. Sorry,
Oh shit.
I don't know if I can curse on this, but
Yeah. By the way, don't do this at home if this is not legal in your home
oh
country.
yeah, definitely want to put that out there. You want to make sure you're over 21 and is legal in your state.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so anyway, I don't practice what I preach because I was doing this when I was not 21. But anyway, yeah, so I would do it that way, but it was very weak, and they got really messed up with the tea. And so what I did is I took the tea, I boiled it down to make a syrup, and then I used the syrup instead and mixed that. I either used the syrup in the baking process instead of actually trying to infuse it with the butter, or I would simmer the butter with the syrup so that the fat molecules would bind to the THC, and that would work with the rest of the dish. But yeah, there's lots of stuff you can do with it. I don't really mess with that so much anymore
Hmm.
because I might in the future, but I am trying to do something a little bit more legitimate. And basically, the way it's set up here is that you pretty much need to have had to dealt weed illegally very successfully in order to be able to do it legal now because it's so expensive, um, or have success in another area. But
Like
it's
Mike
an
Tyson.
yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, 30 tons of weed in a month. Jeez.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. $40,000, right? That was like
yeah, something like
when I
that.
heard that, like that was such a like weird concept to hear. Like if you get 40,000 in Nepal, you could like successfully run like a startup. Like $40,000 in Nepal, you
Yeah,
can run a startup. Like you don't even need to care about the competition. Like just spend
really.
like 20,000 on operations and rest 20,000 on marketing, and you're good. Like 40,000.
That's
You have
funny.
enough money to burn in Nepal if you want to run a good startup here. But we're digressing. Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, so I want to make sure like if I was to work with it, I want it to be in a healthy way,
Hmm.
and I think the best possible way would to either get like THC oil, pure oil,
Hmm.
and put that in the ingredients, or you can use some butter. Butter excessively is going to raise your cholesterol and it can clot your blood system and such. So I try not to do butter too much. The keto, I talk a bunch of shit about the ketogenic diet. I think it has good merits, but it's for people with cancer, and I think it's silly that people are using it for whatever. But anyway, people are finding successes. I just think it's a little silly. You don't want to do too much of the fat because really it's calorie
Hmm.
it's about calorie consumption, and fat is the most calorie dense macronutrient. But again, I digress. And yeah, I would be interested in maybe using it in some kind of oil or some kind of simple syrup naturally with honey, and using that in some kind of granola bars. I think that could be like a really cool idea.
Hmm.
But for the most part, right now, I'm trying to be a little bit more legitimate. I might just have that on the side for fun.
Hmm.
But if you want to mess with that industry, you you can have some risk. I mean, they have decriminalized it in California quite a bit, so you don't run as much risk. But if you want to work with the dispensaries, they're actually working really hard to be as legitimate as possible, especially with their vendors, because the feds, they still come to California and they still shut down. They still will take all your money and they'll take all your product, and it happens. So you got to be ready for it, and you got to make sure things are as legitimate as possible, so the California government will have your back a little bit.
Hmm. Or we could go to heaven, and by heaven I mean Canada over there, and then just like run a business over there. And I hear and I met Canadians. They're way better at dealing with people than rest of the world. By rest of the world, even us. Like they're the most polite people I've ever met. Like now let me go a little bit into what you do, because this podcast is about highlighting what you do as an entrepreneur. We digressed a lot about what we like and what we enjoy. That is the good herb. But then, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and what kind of food you recommend, and what's your target demographic when you're trying to do your podcast? Because I understand, because having listened to some of the snippets of your podcast, but then if you give a little bit of an intro, our audience will be more than enlightened and more than happy to understand what your podcast is and maybe listen to it.
Okay, yeah. Basically, people mistake when I say the Wild Man Chef, people think I'm calling myself the Wild Man Chef. That's not at all what I'm doing. So just to kind of give everybody an idea of what the idea is, there is this book called The Iron John, and my target demographic is millennial males, and I think we're like I'm at the tail end of the like Gen Y, so millennial males are like 20s to 30s and such like that,
My generation,
and
right?
yeah. So the wild man in the book The Iron John is that primal side of us, and that's the part.
Mm-hmm.
It's the part we're seeing that people are talking about this quote unquote toxic masculinity, and it's a misnomer. Their toxic masculinity isn't masculinity, and that's what this book is. It's about the coming of age from boy to man,
Mm-hmm.
and what tribes have been doing for thousands of years to make that happen,
Mm-hmm.
and how that really beautiful process is what yields a better society for everybody. And so I took that idea and wanted to apply it to what I knew, which was food,
Mm-hmm.
and what I'm looking to get better at, which is nutrition. And I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed for myself, whenever I've had good things in my life happen, whenever life things come together very well, it is almost always in congruence with the fact that I am taking very good care of my body, I am taking very good care of my mind, I am exercising very regularly, and I am feeling good about my nutrition, I'm eating well, all those things. And so basically, what I do with the podcast and what I do with the YouTubes and the meal prep streams, stuff like that, is I want to show people how to do this for themselves and kind of just get this idea out of the way that eating healthy is more expensive or inaccessible. It is actually less expensive with proper planning to eat healthier. And I believe, I mean, I hear all about, I don't know how pervasive that the U.S. like news and politics are in the rest of the world. As Americans, we can kind of get into this bubble and feel like we're the only ones that exist. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want to make sure like everybody knows. I don't know if you guys even know what's going on here, but to give you just a very small snippet without giving any kind of opinion, it's a lot about like gun violence and deaths that are like having to do with crime and stuff like that, and all of this like hate stuff, and we're not even paying attention to the fact that the biggest killer in the United States is heart disease, the
Mm-hmm.
number one killer, and right behind that is diabetes, and that's type 2 diabetes, and type 2 diabetes is your fault for the most part. There's some hereditary stuff. Most of the hereditary stuff is type 1 diabetes, but type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, or heart disease, those are literally fat butt diseases. And so if I can help people to learn how to do this for themselves, especially guys, because like we've talked about before, our generations, we're not really buying into this whole marriage thing. And we're starting to see from our parents and their parents that it's not really doing a lot for a happy life in some ways. And it might not work for all of us. And because our society is moving in a certain way, women don't even really want to get married that much, and in a lot of cases. I mean, in America, you're good luck finding a wife before they turn 25. I mean, because they're hoeing, and that's just what it is, and we're all hoeing. So,
I mean, like
um,
everybody's hoeing over there, like in college.
yeah, we're all
It's like,
hoeing.
goddamn, like, and I understand that's because the millennium perspective is until and unless you want to take care of yourself, you can't learn to coexist with somebody else. For example, you never know if you like if you want to spread your towel and then put it in a rack where you can like dry it off, or like me who just throws it in this like pile of clothes and then doesn't even care, and then next morning he's like, yeah, I should have dried it out. And then it takes years and years to understand that and get that through your thick skull that yeah, the towel needs to be on a drying rack or something. And my mom has been like telling me like since I was like what, like 5 to do this, and then I'm finally like making this constant effort to understand, oh, take this monkey brain, put the towel there. Now, like those are the small things that like everybody else takes for granted, but then you have to learn that and skill like overall because like, and I think that hasn't been discussed as much. And then I like your podcast because of that. That because like you focusing on the one single problem everybody has, and I think a lot of is what Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. You understand? You've heard of him, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Peterson. He talks about his book. He gets a lot of bad rap for what he says. I don't want to go deep into like all of it, all of what he says. I did read his book. I did find it fascinating. Some parts of his books were really illuminating for me, and some other parts were like, okay, like I can't relate to this, but that's what he talks about is like we as men need to take responsibility of our own actions. We need to manifest our own destiny. For that, the first thing we need to do is like make up our own bed, and that's the hardest thing to do. We can always make up this excuse of going out of your house or having this appointment early on or need to go to the shower, drink coffee early in the morning, and then you kind of forget about all the other things. But the first thing in the morning you start making your bed. The morning shows the day. However your morning is, it's going to dictate what you're going to do and how you're going to feel. Now, talking about how you're going to feel in terms of food, what sort of food do you recommend for someone who's really into fitness but does have like good taste for something sweet and something savory? They don't want to eat like you said, like boiled chicken and boiled rice. I know you talk a lot about this in your podcast, but if you give a little bit of a snippet, I can sell this thing and make it into a clip and sell it to other people over there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's all about using like the basic fresh ingredients, and there's ways to make these ingredients taste really great. We've been sold this idea that you have to have really high sugar, really high fats in order to have something delicious, whereas you can utilize things like honey that doesn't spike your blood sugar like crazy. You can have really steak is really enjoyable, and there's sugar in it too. That's why it gets brown when you sear it, because you're actually caramelizing the sugar in the meat. And anytime you see brown on meat, you're caramelizing that sugar. With the sweet tooth, what you can do is look at what the French do, because the French, you'll always see your fat French guy, but for the most part, the French are in pretty good shape, and they're not enormous for the most part. And the reason for that is because I'm trained in French cuisine, and they use small little serving sizes. And so, like, one of my favorite things is the macaron. It's basically two marshmallow cookies with some like really nice filling.
Mm-hmm.
And I love these things because they are not very high in calories, maybe a maximum of 200 calories. They're super enjoyable, and you can just pop one in for dessert. And if you want to get crazy with it, you can that little like filling, you can make that out of wheat butter and just have an even better night. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's ways that we can curb this, and there's some solutions that have been offered by like companies like On Nutrition and this Larry cookie that I talked about in one of my episodes. And those are mostly going to be for those that are trying to build muscle, but you can at least make those calories work for you a little bit better by,
Mm-hmm.
instead of having all the calories in the carb sugar department, you're having some of them being used towards protein and fat. And so that can be very helpful. But snacking, when it comes to snacking, like snacking on whole things like almonds and beef jerky I've been snacking on beef jerky all day, having granola bars. Like, I love the Lara bars. I talked about that in one of the episodes, because there's some of the flavors in the Lara bars that have literally like 3 or 4 ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really think about the fact that a lot of these quote unquote health foods, they have tons of stuff in them. And I've watched a clip of a nutritionist talking about how all of these things actually inhibit our growth in our health. And so by going for those more primal sources, again, honey, nuts, jerkies, you can go for like dehydrated fruits and stuff, but that is like a concentrated sugar source, and so you want to be a little bit careful with it. But it is useful and is a little bit more whole, and so that's going to cause your body to react. Even though we are looking for less calorie intake, you want to see how your body reacts to these types of sugars and snacks, because if you have these super concentrated, super refined sugars, yeah, they might kind of keep you down on the calorie count if you're careful with them, but they will spike your blood sugar. And the way it works is, if you are having these items later at night when you're not using energy, that
Mm-hmm.
spike in blood sugar it's going to cause your body to create fat because there is no immediate use for that
Mhm.
energy. And so whole ingredients and making sure that even if you do want to go for these really refined sugars and such and you really have this craving to take care of, go for small amounts of it. Go for small cookies like the macarons, or just maybe even split something, or like I love the Halo Top because the Halo Top of the pints, when I get a really big craving for ice cream, the
Mhm.
Halo Top is probably not the healthiest thing in the world. It's basically like whipped something. I don't, I don't know what it is, but um, it is like 300 calories for a pint, as opposed to like a pint of Ben and Jerry's, which is over 1,000. And so
Oh,
there's different
dude,
strategies.
I used to have like um I used to have like when I was in college, and I used to have these like days where like I'd be just chilling with my friends enjoying some herb. Um, I used to have half a gallon of ice cream,
Yeah.
sitting down and just chugging it. And the God has given me enough like high metabolism, so I can like metabolize a lot of fat. But then but the funny thing about it is my friend who I used to eat ice cream and all this thing with, he had an insane, like I say I have high metabolism, he had an insane level of metabolism. He would never get fat. So like I used to get like a gut, but then it wouldn't add up anywhere else. But then he
Mhm.
never got a gut, and I was like, damn, I can't compete with this guy. But then going back to what eating healthy in our house, we make our own yogurt or curd. You know what a
Oh
curd is?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we make our own curd every day. So you have some of the milk, residual milk, like like sometimes you don't use up all the milk in the day, and then you just make that into curd, and the next morning you have this fresh batch of curd, and that's really probiotic. It like really helps your gut health, and it's really good for you. And then recently, I've turned my parents into eating oatmeal every day instead of eating rice and a heavy meal at night. So they only eat like a really good breakfast, like a rice, curry, and lentils. That's healthy compared to like U.S. standards. But even if you look at from Nepal standard, eating a lot of rice, like a rice is this much, like it's the biggest portion, but it's a
Mhm.
carb and it needs to be the small portion. But then Nepal's diet, it's sort of uh, structured that way. So I made them eat oats, and then yesterday when my mom was like asking me, "Isn't there any sugar in this?" I said I put some honey in it. So what I usually do is I get a pot of milk, I start getting it simmered a little bit, I add oats in it, and I add a little bit of honey, and then the trick is to make it really excellent. So you get cardamom, and then you get
Mm.
the bark sugar, like the thing you put in a horchata. I don't know what the name for that. I forgot the name. Like um, the thing you put in horchata to make horchata like that. It's like kind of sweet. It's like a bark. It's like a tree
Oh,
bark.
cinnamon.
Cinnamon, yeah. So you get a little bit of cardamom and a little bit of cinnamon. I'm sorry, I forgot. So and then you crush that and you make, and then you get a little bit of pinch, and then you sprinkle around it, and then you make it. Oh my God, that is going to take it to a next level. Trust me,
Yeah.
cardamom has has been the most underrated spice in the whole world, because if you add that to tea, if you add that to, let's say, a milkshake, it's going to take that to a, it's going to like make your tongue and your mouth, and then it's going to make it feel so many experiences you never felt before. So if you have a banana shake and then you decided, okay, like I can't put ice cream in it, how do I like make the flavor better? Just add like crushed cardamom, and I'm telling you, the smell, the taste, it just takes it. Even if it's like really thick, it just goes in and infuses with the milk and everything. And I always say, milk and cardamom, even both of those things, the best combination. Like if you get whole milk and cardamom, that's going to take it to a next level. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about barbecuing, because I
Mm.
used to barbecue a lot, because in the South, like beer and barbecue was like the diet during the
Hmm.
summer. And then I had this recipe. So this is Have you heard about tandoori chicken?
Yeah.
Have you ever made it, or have you ever
I
had it?
never made it before. I
So
believe I'm pretty sure I've had it in the past.
Yeah. So usually you get like a mix where you can get the recipe online. Most important part is like the curd or like yogurt, and then you what do you call it? You put the meat and then you store it for like 24 hours in the fridge, like, and then you let it rest. Like you
Like a
soak.
marinade.
Yeah, marinate. So you marinate for 24 hours, and then the secret behind is you don't do it in an oven. You have to do it in like over a skewer or over a barbecue.
Mm.
Oh my god, it just takes it to a new level. And most of the times I'm using like really organic stuff, not like the stuff you get at Walmart. I used to go to the farmers market even in New Orleans, and it was very easy to find all these fresh fruits and vegetables. And then you sprinkle that fresh on lemon juice over it. Oh my god, it's so juicy and so tasty. I'm
Mm.
salivating when I'm talking about it right now. Do you do a lot of barbecue these days, or it's less barbecue and more baking?
You know, I'm in an interesting situation. The oven here doesn't work, and it's part of the reason why I'm moving from this particular spot. But I have done some barbecuing fairly recently. Well, not barbecuing, grilling, and that's a really important distinction. Barbecue is more of a slow, very
Mm-hmm.
slow process over coals that have been very like meticulously made. It takes a good amount of skill to make a proper coal bed, and usually it does involve a lot of smoke. Grilling is just, you're gonna get like fire and put like a grill over it, whatever, and it's quick. It's usually just kind of quick. So grilling is fantastic when it comes to health because one of the podcasts I did with one of the Krav Maga teachers that I
Wow.
trained under,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he does a lot of grilling, and it's because you lessen the amount of fat that you have to use. It's not sitting in fat and soaking up the fat, and you're losing some of the fat from the actual protein because it's dripping down the grill, and so you're kind of taking some of the calories out, and you're still getting a um, really great end product. So yeah, I love grilling. I think it's a really fantastic way to do
Mm-hmm.
the to 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 kind of mitigate the actual fat because in order to get a good product you have to use fat. I mean, even if you're baking, if you're not using enough fat, you're not going to really have a very pleasant product.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't have a grill, one strategy that I've used is having a cast iron pan that has the raised ridges.
Mm-hmm.
And what that'll do is that again it will reduce the amount of fat that you have to use in order to cook the protein. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
fat's going to come out in the protein. It's not all soaking up all kinds of fat all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't have access to a grill, that is definitely one way to do it. But yeah, I mean, grilling is a shit. I was my family's from the South, and I really miss like good ribs. Ribs, oof, like you you can just really you can make me do anything with ribs, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like barbecuing is where it's at for sure, and the marinade is where it's at. Also, kind of going back to what you're talking about with spices,
Mm-hmm.
I do want to kind of put attention to the fact that utilization of spices is really what does it. And that's one of the most beautiful things about Indian cuisine is because basically I learned I curry was such this huge mystery to me. I had no idea what it was. It was like this amazing sauce, and I've had Thai green curry and red curry and everything, and I had no idea what it was. And then after making it, I was like, oh, this is a tomato sauce with different kinds of spices in it, or
Mm-hmm.
like a
Exactly.
bell pepper sauce with
Mm-hmm.
different spices. So you're able to take literally like a puree of a vegetable or a fruit and make this completely different thing utilizing different spices.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I got from. It's actually funny you went to college in New Orleans because one of the guys, the private chef from DC, he's from New Orleans, and
Wow.
he's a Cajun chef, and that's what it is. Is like in our conversation, he was able to take really basic chicken and rice and create this whole new thing just by adding a few different kinds of spices. And so by learning how to use spices properly, I have a flavor Bible. I think anybody that wants to learn how to cook like a chef needs to purchase the flavor Bible because that is like the go-to. Every legitimate chef has one.
Mm-hmm.
It basically tells you whatever protein you're using, whatever spice you're using, or herb or vegetable, and everything that goes with it, all the spices, proteins, and everything that goes with it. So it's a really great way to learn. And
Mhm.
utilizing spices is what's going to really take you from having this unsustainable practice
Mhm.
and utilizing cooking methods such as grilling and barbecuing. That's what's really going to add that sustainability piece into it because it's going to be more of a lifestyle and less of a diet.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, now what it tells me is like you're really passionate about like food and cooking, and I am too. Trust me, like my aim when I retire is to open this little bit of a small restaurant, like really high-fi restaurant. All I do is I give out food for free, but only for a few people. Like 2 hours
Mm.
of the day, I sit down and cook, and then when I finish cooking, I'll just sit down, and hopefully it's legal in Nepal by then, and then just smoke and drink wine
Yeah.
and talk till 12 p.m. and then go to sleep afterwards. That's my dream for retiring. Like people say they have no image of retiring or anything. I have a perfect image. That's what I want to do, and that's what I set out for day one. Now I want to ask you something. Like so, there's this recipe I use for more like tell you something. There's this recipe we use for the momo for the dumplings, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're talking about purees and tomato sauce. So what I usually do for this tomato, might want to just try this tomato sauce. So excellent. So what you do is you get a tomato. Usually get the giant ones. Don't get the smaller ones. The
Yeah.
more giant ones. So what you
Mm-hmm.
do is you get the
Like
giant
Roma, I
ones.
think, are the big ones. Roma
Yeah,
tomatoes. Yeah.
yeah, Roma tomatoes. And the other ones I forgot the names. I used to get them at Rouse's or Walmart, but um, because it was closest to my campus. So you get those right, and then you boil those for about like 20 minutes when like the skin starts coming off. Then what you do is when the skin starts coming off, and then what you do is you put that in like a blender, right? And then you start like turning it into a puree, right? And then you put that into a little bit of a pot. Make the heat as low as it can be, and then you start adding a little bit of salt uh, as per your taste. And here's the magic. Now, I don't know if you like too much spicy food, but this is how you turn a sauce into a great sauce. You get one of those dried up. You still have some water left from boiling the tomato, right? What you do is use that water and boil the dried up red chili peppers, the ones you
Mm-hmm.
get at the store.
Mm-hmm.
You dry them up, and you can see almost at the same time, like if it will turn into paste when you blend it. So you can see it like it's gonna get really soft and like really easy to blend. You put that in the blender, you try to blend it as much as possible. If it doesn't blend, use the puree and add up a little bit of puree and then puree and then mix it with the tomato puree. Now what
Mm.
you do is you start adding a little bit of turmeric, and then
Mm.
what you do is the
Yeah.
next step. This is where this is different for if people have peanut allergies. Don't do this. What you do is you boil a little bit of peanuts, whatever was left, like the water left on the earlier. You boil a little bit of peanuts, and then you make that peanut into a peanut puree, and then put that back into that little bit of a pot where you've been heating that tomato puree, and then time to cook it. Right when that tomato and the red chili starts burning and you see the color change, do it for 5 minutes. Boom, the best sauce you ever have with momos. That's the best recipe that I can
Yeah.
recommend. And
Sounds very Thai.
yeah, it's very Thai, but trust me, it will take your experience to a new
I love
level.
Thai food. I'm
Yeah, the
I'm
Thai
all
food
about
is
Thai
great.
food.
Yeah, Thai food is great. And then I want to ask you something else. It's very cold out here. Nepal's got a temperate climate. It never gets really too cold or really too hot, but it's always perfect. But I always have a blankie because I
Mm.
like wearing blankies. And then it's very. And then one
Should get
thing
a
about
snuggie,
like
dude.
yeah, and then one thing about like Nepal is like I don't like to personally use too many tables and chairs because that like if you sit in front of a chair too long, you get crazy. So I'm always sitting down. We've got all these mats lying around here in our house. We're sitting down in our mats instead of our beds. So it's always fun to like experiment in workspace. What's it like for you? What's your workspace like? That's what I wanted to get at.
Workspace for what? For cooking or for doing the podcast or?
Yeah, cooking, podcast, your usual stuff. When you're going out, like how do you pack? And then like by workspace, I mean this vague term where you say like how do you like go from like when it goes for your podcast, when it goes for your cooking, and when it goes for your travel, how do you pack? How do you manage your logistics?
Well, I really go for minimalism, and that's kind of what you learn in the French kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a lot of the guys that I worked with were Bouchon guys. For those who don't know, Thomas Keller owns Bouchon,
Mm-hmm.
and he was the best chef in America. And then Grant Achatz, who also worked for Thomas Keller, became best chef in America. I don't know who it is now, but anyway, um, the French they teach you minimalism in the kitchen, and so basically, and this is true with Japanese kitchens too. It's you a cluttered workspace is a cluttered mind. I'm kind of not practicing what I preach here with my desk right now, but for the most part, I do try to keep it as minimal as possible, and that goes with workspace, kitchen stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I make sure I have all my tools ready,
Mm-hmm.
and clean as you go is the biggest thing, and always cleaning up when you like say like I don't mind if I just put this here for a minute, that thing turns into a pile of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so keeping it minimal, I just have a very simple desk. Um, it's just very simple. When I'm traveling, I think about what I absolutely need, what I only ever need to take my backpack when I travel. I don't bring a suitcase or anything. And rolling the clothes, just like you always roll the maps, you always roll the clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And that saves a lot of space and it's a lot better. And I've had a lot of travel cubes. Travel cubes are big, like they're fantastic. Um, yeah, I guess minimalism is really where it's at. I try to keep everything as clean as possible, everything as simple as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of stuff going on. Like even watching Rogan's podcast, I'm just like, dude, why do you have so much shit on the desk? Like that would drive me crazy. I couldn't do that. But yeah, especially in the kitchen, that is very important. It's like everything needs to be as simple as possible and very organized because I've wound up in situations, especially when I've been working on this culinary boot camp. Last week I was in production, and at the end of every recipe I had a mess, and it's just because it was a lot of work and very intense, and I needed to make sure I was getting everything for the camera looking nice, but I sacrificed my workspace a little bit, which is something I need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a really great motivation for learning how to adapt that practice of minimalism and cleaning as you go is by working in a French kitchen because if you don't, you will get yelled at and you will be told how trash you are and worthless you are. And Japanese kitchen, I've never worked in a Japanese kitchen as a cook, but I have worked front of house in a Japanese restaurant. And they are one of these guys. His name is Sun, and I think he was from Japan. He's a sushi chef from Japan, and this was like a club slash restaurant in Vegas on the Strip. It's called Sake Rock. It's a great restaurant. If anybody visits Vegas, go to Sake Rock. It's in the park in between, right next to the MGM, or right across the street from the MGM, right next to New York, New York. But this guy would never smile. He would never ever smile, and that was my crazy party days. Um, like I did some embarrassing shit back then, but he would never smile, and so I would literally dance. It was like a dance club kind of like environment. We even had professional dancers as servers, and I would dance around like a stupid idiot as much as possible, and I got him to laugh one time, and it was the best thing ever. And that's just kind of trying to illustrate just how intense and serious and meticulous everything is, especially in a Japanese kitchen. The French, they're the French the technique is so pervasive in all cuisine restaurants. I mean, almost every restaurant that you go to has a French style kitchen setup because Escoffier invented the militaristic type French kitchen, and that's the kitchen that's most in use today. But the Japanese have a very different style, and you still see the same type of maybe even more so meticulousness and cleanliness needed, and it's definitely a hell of a way to learn it. It's a very militaristic type of environment, which is why many of my coworkers ended up being battle-hardened vets. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I've worked in the kitchen before. Let me tell you, I was in this place and I was volunteering for this time at this uh, amusement park. I used to flip burgers. It
Mm-hmm.
was such a nice time. I was helping some people out there, and it was a fun time. And then you learn a lot. Okay, I'm telling you, having worked only for 3 months over there as a volunteer, it's not easy. That's when I actually thought I cannot cut it as like a professional in this field because the demand of work. You have to clean up every day, and I burned. I still have scars from like the burns I
Oh
got
yeah.
by being stupid. Using that burger grill where you flip the patties and then you're trying to do the bacon. The funny thing about it is I don't eat beef at all. Nobody eats beef in Nepal. When you talked about steak, it's like illegal to cut a cow in Nepal. We respect cows.
Is it Hinduism?
Yeah, so it's a
Okay.
mix. So about 60% of the people are Hindus, and like 25% of the people are Buddhist. So you have monasteries and
Oh
monks,
yeah, gotcha.
and then they're very peaceful. And I would say I'm some sort of a mix of both. I would like to think I rely more on the Buddhism side because it's such an easy religion to follow. Just be chill and nice thing to be nice to everybody. And I did want to get on the last point of this podcast on my side because see that you're trying to enjoy yourself a little bit, but then
Oh no, don't worry about it. I'm just multitasking. I'm
yeah.
paying attention. I'm here.
No, no,
Quickly.
no. Go ahead, do it. It's better like somebody actually smoked up in this podcast because I can't on my side of the podcast. Anyways, there's this little bit. So let me give you a little bit of history. 5 years ago, when I went to the U.S., there was not as many restaurants or food places in Kathmandu, the capital city here.
Hmm.
5 years later, I'll tell you, every corner has this little food place. Every corner there's more food places, and like there are even franchises from here that are about momos. Like I said, there's a Boda Momo, there's like 7 or 8 crunchy crispy fried chicken franchises. We even did one podcast with the one of the founders of one of those franchises in this podcast. It's called KKFC. Do check it out.
Hmm.
The food culture has boomed. People are going out. They're eating a lot. Even in restaurants, you get these customized menus. People are getting really serious about food here. But the problem is we don't. I don't think we have any Michelin star chefs from Nepal. Okay, so that's where they find like the gastronomy of a country is when you have these accolades and when you have all these awards and these things like drive all the tourists coming in into Nepal. And that's what drives me to my next point. Nepal's coming up with this Visit Nepal 2020. This whole is a marketing plan where our government, Nepali government, is trying to bring all the tourists from all over the world to come to Nepal and then understand Nepal and visit Nepal. And I think you would benefit a lot from that because like the food culture is really exploding right now here. And if you came to Nepal even for 3 months and then you went to one of these restaurants, you visited all these restaurants, you could learn a lot and you could add a lot of value here. So it's my open invitation to you to come to Nepal and then discover Nepal's food. And if you ever
Oh
felt like
yeah.
you wanted to start a restaurant over here in Nepal, that's the most profitable business in Nepal at this moment. And I believe,
Really?
yeah, that's the most profitable business right now. I talked to this investor, and this guy you used to manage like one of the biggest e-commerce platform, and at the end of all our discussion he says, our coffee shops looks really profitable at the moment. I might look into that. That's what he said. I was like,
Interesting.
yeah, food. Trust me, food will never go out of business in Nepal. If you can always like pivot your menu, you can always make sure you get good, safe, clean food. It's always good. And the best part about it is you don't get like that sort of mass-produced food here. If you really want to get organic vegetables, organic food, you can always like grow it in your own like backyard. The soil here is really productive and the air quality is good, and the view itself is so nice. So it's a perfect place to open a restaurant. Have you seen all those images of restaurants in Vienna, Austria over there, in like different parts of Europe? They're
I think
overlooking
so.
a mountain, a forest, a lake, and all of that.
Yeah, I think so.
90% of what that is has been unexplored in Nepal. There's lakes, there's mountains, but then people are not willing to open a restaurant because like the passion to open a food place is like really limited around the valley, the Kathmandu Valley, the capital city itself. Would you be interested in that sort of venture?
You know, I would love to go to Nepal because I would love to learn a lot about it. My buddy Jake, he went up, he just got back from his world tour. Um, and not to sound too important, he was just traveling around the world. He just lives in Vegas, and that's what he does sometimes. And he went to Nepal, hit base camp at the Mount Everest and stuff. And he just had he raved about it. He thought it was amazing. And I've watched movies about Nepal.
Mhm.
Like the what was that one movie where it's like these two guys kind of wander into Nepal, and then the Chinese government comes in or something like that and tries to take over this monastery. I don't remember what the movie was, but yeah, I've there it's in our culture. Like I would love to visit it, but with the restaurant thing, I'm more focused. I'm trying to build interest with see if anybody cares about this stuff, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm actually looking at cloud kitchens.
Oh,
And yeah, that's and I'm gonna go. I need to go. I need to take a break from LA, and so I'm gonna try to save up some money, and then I'm gonna go to Cancun for a couple of months just to refresh a little bit, and then I'm gonna come back and work on getting a cloud kitchen together. And the point is for me is I've had a lot of days where I didn't meal prep and I had to spend a bunch of money or go to a restaurant that was like super healthy, and
mhm.
I wasn't familiar with the menu and stuff. And so my goal is to provide this basically like delivery only like meal prep style meals that are fresh.
Mhm.
And I think that the cloud kitchen, it is not even being talked about yet. It's like
Oh,
barely even started. So
if I may interject,
yeah.
I'm doing this online course, like this boot camp with Y Combinator. You might have heard of them. They're one of the biggest accelerators out in the world, or incubators. They incubated Twitch, Airbnb,
Oh wow.
the biggest Dropbox, let's just say, one of the best
Wow.
ones that I think. They create a lot of value. There is this team from Nepal called premiumsalads.com. I'll send you a link. They are
Okay.
trying to build a cloud kitchen in Nepal. So maybe you could synergize with them.
Oh
Maybe
shoot.
see when we start talking, there's
Yeah.
possibilities. They're actually looking for people with expertise. And I met the founder. I had a chat with the founder like this, and they're really interested into going out and expanding their base from Nepal, because they understand the logistics and all the fresh vegetables and food side. But then the cloud kitchen and the expertise, they were looking for chefs and a professional in that industry. I might be able to connect you with them. I don't know
Yeah.
how
Damn.
much value you might be able to get out of it, but the minimum I can do it, and I make no promises or no guarantees.
Yeah, I mean that'd be just cool to talk about because that's something that I honestly believe that it is the future, and I would like to come at it from a point of not not necessarily making it easier for everybody to be fat and lazy at home, but more along the lines of being able to free people to do the things that they want to do without having to worry so much about, dang, I didn't get my meal prep done, so now my goals are crap. So, getting that in. But yeah, I think it absolutely is the future, and we're seeing restaurants go from having like 5%, like 5% cash flow from deliveries all the way up to 50% of their cash flow is deliveries. And to make extra money, I deliver for Uber Eats.
Hmm.
And just so that I can learn about it and really know what's going on, know
Hmm.
what the challenges are for the restaurants. And
Hmm.
that's a really big important part is you can't just you can't just decide I'm going to do this thing. You got to like it you can't walk in. A lot of culinary students think they're going to walk into a kitchen and going to be a chef. No, you got to learn how to wash dishes, man. And
Hmm.
so you got to learn every part, and that's what I'm doing because yeah, that is the future for sure.
Yeah. I'll connect you with them, and I'll send you the link for that, and possibly you can connect with them yourself. The
Yeah.
internet's a big, everybody can reach out each other. Like the internet
Yeah.
has made it so easy for us. thank you so much for this podcast. Hopefully,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
yeah, hopefully next time when we do the podcast, we both can do it legally, and then we can smoke and talk about different things, and
Maybe in person. That'd be
yeah,
sick.
even do it in person. Yeah, and then I hope to get some value for you regarding the things we talked about, and I can maybe connect you with the premium salads people. There's plenty of other opportunities in Nepal related to food. There's this like you said about the cloud kitchen. I just want to put a plug. There's this service called FoodMario. What they do is instead of delivering food from restaurants, what they do is you can cook it from your house, and then they'll put it on their online menu, and they'll deliver it from the house, from your house, to a customer. So they're enabling home chefs.
Oh
We're
wow.
just starting to learn, and that's a really new concept. And I haven't seen that. Is there some sort of service like that in the U.S.? I don't think so, right?
I had never heard of something like that, but it could be possible. It's the laws are crazy. There are some cottage laws that allow for some home production, but yeah, I don't know. That would be fantastic because that is a big thing is that people don't want to do this industry because either A, you're going to work for somebody and be a slave to the kitchen
Mm-hmm.
and make no money,
Mm-hmm.
or B, you have to create your own thing and like take this huge risk. And having a restaurant is basically one of the worst business decisions you
Mm-hmm.
can make in the United States. Or C, you got to make your own like brand or something. And so by that sounds like a really great way to get people in the industry and make it so that it's not such a crapshoot, so that everybody can do it, have fun.
Yeah, that's so cool. So I want to do a shout out to Food Mario, the service I was talking about. And I know the CEO; he's a great guy. He's always trying to promote other entrepreneurs. That's why I wanted to promote him.
Cool.
Thank you so much, and I hope you
Yeah, thank
enjoy
you.
your time for the rest of the night. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and hopefully I see you soon again.
All right, man. Thanks so much, and you have a good day.
You too.
Bye.